All right, everybody. I just got done shooting an episode with one of my best friends, and I mean that, Johnny Elsasser. So Johnny Elsasser, we've had him on the show, or we attempted to have him on the show before. We've done some Instagram lives and things together, but for those of you who don't know this guy, at some point I'm like, I don't even know if I need to do an introduction for him, just because he's that guy. He's awesome, and you probably have heard of him before. But Johnny is a former special ops. He was a ranger. He's done so many things in his life. He is in the men's development space right now. He does so much. He does the wild man experience, which we dive into a little bit in towards the end of the podcast. So make sure that you listen the whole way through as usual, and really dive into the wild man experience. He was doing it out of Austin, or out of Corpus Christi down in Texas, and that one was awesome just in and of itself. And now he has added on the Kodiak Wildman experience. So Kodiak, Alaska. So that's actually going to be one that I am going to. So for listeners and stuff that are out there, like, hey, I want to go to one of these experiences. In my opinion, I'm definitely biased, but come to the Kodiak experience. Make sure you do it quickly, because I know that thing is going to sell out fast. Anyway, so he's got the Wildman experience. He's got the Art of the Masculinity podcast. Again, he does one-on-one coaching. He has new programs and stuff that he's launching. He's got the Savage system that he works with as well. I mean, the guy is just well decorated, no pun intended, because he's former special ops. So make sure you strap in today, tune into this, and be sure to listen the whole way through. It's one of our longer podcasts, but I promise you, every single bit of this is going to be life-changing. What we talk about is going to be the toxic masculinity, what it is, where it came from, our interpretation of it, and how we can really evolve as men and but completely eradicate the term toxic masculinity. So again, buckle in. Thanks for tuning in today, and here's Johnny. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Doc Jacque Show. I got my good buddy here, Johnny Elsasser. Johnny, thank you so fucking much for being on the podcast here today. I appreciate you, man.
Oh, I love it, brother. I've been excited to be on the show. And what other people don't know is we actually have already recorded this one time, and it didn't come through. And so
I don't know who's to blame.
This will be the official version.
This is the first one was like the recital. This is the legit version, and I screwed it up. 100% ownership, my fault. So. So
I love it.
All right, man. So we're gonna be talking about toxic. It's almost hard to say toxic masculinity today. So I wanted to obviously come to you, and there's going to be a reason behind why I wanted to choose this topic, because I know it's something that you're passionate about. It's like restoring that masculinity in men. So I think you're the expert, in my opinion, on this category. So I wanted to start with just a basic question. What is toxic masculinity?
Yeah, it's, this to me is like one of the big pieces of the conversation, because I think the people that use the term toxic masculinity are pretty ignorant. And I say that with, a little bit of love, but also a little bit of, tension, because the fact that what they're doing is they're pervading a problem within society that's deeming men unfit for being authentic in who they are. And obviously we'll dive into this, but you talk about this a lot. And just biologically, there are aspects of men that have to do with our hormones that promote certain levels of masculinity, right? And so when people say toxic masculinity, I had a good friend of mine, Josh Trent, on my show one time, and he said, toxicity, what is toxicity? Well, if you're a fan of etymology, you understand that toxicity, by definition means unfit for consumption. So what you're saying when you say toxic masculinity, for anybody out there, you're saying masculinity is unfit for society, is what that comes down to. And so that's why I say, like, there's a lot of ignorance in people when they try to say toxic masculinity. And I think it's a term that needs to be eradicated from society, because at the end of the day, nobody's saying toxic femininity, right? Nobody's labeling feminine as being toxic or unfit for society. So in my opinion, the first thing is that needs to be eradicated. Now, kind of to a little bit of what you and I were talking about before the episode, is that there are certain aspects within femininity and masculinity where people can abuse them, and they're incredibly toxic to society, in that the behavior exuded by that, when it's excessive, can become really bad and can have a detrimental effect on other people. That is somebody presenting a bad behavior, or exercising a trait in a negative way. But it doesn't mean that masculinity in and of itself is toxic. That is an individual. Just like you can over consume water, and we're predominantly made of water. But yes, people, I don't know if you know this, you can actually over consume it, and it can be detrimental to your health. It's the same thing. Anything in excess can be detrimental to other people or to yourself. And so with toxic, when we talk about toxicity or toxic masculinity, when people say that, I urge people to think of another way to talk about maybe a negative trait presented in somebody, or maybe a negative aspect of somebody's features. Not saying that all masculinity is toxic, because that's what you're doing. You're labeling an entire, half of the world as toxic, if we just, went complete layman and said half and half, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think you're telling little boys, right? Like
Yep.
little boys that just, they act a certain way because it's instinctual in them, or they present certain traits because it's instinctual in them, and they don't know why. They have no negativity towards it. They have no aspects of even really cognitively understanding it, but they do this, and then you're telling them that that's negative. I mean, think about the damage you're doing to that little human, and what they're going to grow up to be as a man. And then eventually, yeah, then they may actually be incredibly toxic as a man in general, as their own individual. But you did that to them by labeling their actions as negative when they were a kid, when they were just having instinctual response systems to their environment. So for me, that's where I go with toxic masculinity. When people say that, I really want them to think about what they're saying, evaluate it before it comes out of their mouth, and really change the paradigm with that form of conversation.
Yeah, and I loved what you said, and I didn't even think about it like this with the water example, And there was that lady who was trying to drink, I think it was like 6 gallons of water, or 10 gallons of water to get her kid an Xbox, and freaking died. But
Yeah,
nobody says, "Oh, well, that's toxic water." Now we do
right,
have toxic water. Don't get me wrong, but like nobody's gonna label all the water is now toxic. Don't drink it. Why? Because some idiot over here overconsumed it. So now we're just gonna
right,
label every ounce of water as toxic. Get it off the shelves.
yep.
And I guess the follow up question with that, and this is, I want your personal opinion. Where do you think, or why do you think that this term, because this is, to me, in my knowledge, this is a relatively recent term. Where do you think this came from? Why do you think this is coming up now versus when we were kids?
There's a great book by James Messerschmidt, who wrote about hegemonic masculinity, and he and Raywin Connell being the preeminent researcher slash social scientist who really came up with hegemonic masculinity and really identified masculinity within societal constructs. They talked about hegemonic masculinity, and James Messerschmidt kind of goes to the infancy of where this quote unquote toxic masculinity came from. And a lot of it came from the second wave feminist movement, where they really villainized masculinity. And in that movement, they carried forward these judgments of masculinity based around like the oppression of kind of the patriarchy constructs. So then they vilified every man around that, and then they tried to vilify masculinity. Well, that term then kind of came mainstream recently, more or less, because of the fact that, social media is a big thing now. And obviously the, corrupt media outlets that are out there that are just, spewing nonsense to everybody to create dissension. They're taking these very minute thought processes of groups, this minority thought process, and they're giving them a microphone. And that's where I think this came up. I don't think predominantly anybody even really follows under believing masculinity is toxic, I think there was a small group of this like second wave feminist movement, which then got pervaded in the media outlets and got a microphone for this type of term, and then put a highlight on masculinity as being all toxic. And that's where it kind of really started from, in my opinion, just in the research that I've done around it.
Yeah, and I think that again, you brought up another really good point, and it's another one that I didn't think of up until this point. So I appreciate you sharing the ability, especially with social media, and incredibly recent as well, the ability for them to be able to kind of divide and conquer. So the more divisions that they can drive in between people. Are you white? Are you black? Are you Asian? There's a category. Now, are you Republican? Are you Democrat? There's a category. Are you a Christian or not? There's a category. And so you're splitting up the masses into these labeled groups. And the more labels we can get on it, then the smaller the group gets, because then there's these different pockets. And so when we are separated and segregated, because that's kind of what they're doing, we are a lot easier to control and get them. And we're just like, well, we don't have enough numbers to really defend ourselves at this point, so we just have to keep continuing to divide and just wither away until we don't have anything left. So that was my take on that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's that in and of itself is a whole conversation on how that's taking place. But I think what I take from that, and the root of where we find a lot of problems with, surrounding these concepts of masculinity today, is that they're creating this divisive nature on men and women, and then they're giving a microphone to a small group so men feel like they're constantly under the microscope. I think it was quite a while back, maybe a few years ago, when the Me Too movement kind of started, and then that turned into a bunch of shambles too, because we see how negative that went. Like there were some legitimate cases that came out, which was beautiful, and people got held accountable for some really, really nasty actions. But then it started to go into other things of guys not really doing anything wrong, and then they're getting painted in a Me Too movement and having to defend their actions when it was a completely consensual situation. And so that even turned, you want to go back to toxic, that turned toxic. It's everything in excess, right? Yeah. And so even the stuff, just so many different things we can go down. But the root of this becomes the fact that as we continue to move forward with where masculinity is, and trying to bring back this construct of what I like to consider more positive masculinity, and is that, men have to start stepping up and leading by example as well, and I think that's the other thing is, and I think a lot of men today are starting to do more of that. But the problem that we have is this divisiveness that was created really put men into an aspect of questioning their confidence, because they're not sure what they can say or do. And people are like, well, if you think you can't say it, like, then it's probably bad. Go fuck yourself. That's not true. You guys have made everything so fucking sensitive now.
So
you can't
PC,
even you can't even joke about anything these days. Yeah. And so it's like, men are just questioning. They can't even be confident men, because they have to question if it's going to get labeled in a negative way or perceived in such a way. Like even holding a door now is labeled negative or oppressive. And you're like, are you serious? Like that is just somebody of good manners being nice. And I hold doors for men and women, but if I hold the door for a woman and the wrong person sees it, it's like the perception is oppression. And you're like, Jesus, really? Are we serious? But that's what we've come to. And so it's just really, that divisiveness has been expanding, and it creates this level of animosity towards men, and men are having to climb out of that. And it's like, you took a few bad apples, then made them the majority. And then now all men are it reminds me of the military in a lot of ways. Capital punishment, right? One guy messes up and everybody gets punished. So that's really what we're seeing right now, which is really sad in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is then, because obviously we're role models for our kids, growing up. So like for my son, if I start questioning my masculinity, then I'm going to have to tell my kid how to be less masculine, which I'll never fucking do. But like in theory, like I would have to pass those on, like, hey, we're not allowed to do this anymore. And the door example, I've got a rule for the door example. Because I frequent like the same places and I'm very OCD, it's kind of problematic at times. I know about how long it's going to take a door to close. If you're going to arrive at the door before it closes, I'm holding the door for you. If you arrive, if you're far enough away that you'd have to sprint to get there, sorry, I'm not holding the door for you. That's my thing. But if somebody did verbally say, hey, that's oppression, don't hold the door for me, whatever, I just tell them to get out of the store. I'll shut the door on them and then you can open it yourself. Like I don't have time for that, you know? And there's a funny comedian, I don't know if you've ever listened to him or not. His name's Chris D'Elia or Dahlia. I don't know exactly how to say his name, but he was like, he was talking about his childhood growing up and how amazing it was and everything. He goes, it's really easy to be a white man in this world. And he goes, well, until like a couple years ago. Now it's really difficult. So he's like going into these layers of like, I mean, the jokes are inappropriate, but he's like, how do you know if a woman wants it? Like at this point, as a white man, if she's like, hey, I would like to do that. And you're like, are you sure? And then you do a 2-second rule and like, I'm just reconfirming. We're moving closer to that destination. Are you sure? Okay. Moving. Are you positive? Like, because it's like, you never know. You never know when something's going to get taken out of context and then it's going to fall back on you. And you're going to fall into this label of, again, being a toxic masculinity, or you throw the white in there as well. And it's just, at some point, it just starts to get ridiculous. And it's like, there is a rise, there is a surge of men who are, and I blame you for this in a good way, there's a surge of men who are now being like, you know what, enough's enough. We need to step into our masculinity again. Because if we as men do not step into our masculinity, then our women are going to have to do that for us. And so we're seeing a wave of, at least I am, seeing a huge wave of women now with masculine traits, and they're pissed off because their husbands aren't showing up. They're not stepping up. They're not being men. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're just being these little sissies on the side. And the women are like, oh, fuck, I got to do this. And now I got to pick up your slack here too. So I see it all the time. I mean, do you see that as well?
Yeah, it causes a lot of dissension in relationships. And not only do I hear about it from people who reach out to me, but my wife gets those messages from a lot of
Yeah.
women that she works with. Like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm creating my business, but I can't get my husband to come along with that, or I can't get my husband to really step up and kind of, when I'm done with business, take control of like the relationship and stuff like that. And so that is affecting relationships negatively. And statistically, there's been studies on how it negatively affects boys growing up when they have single mother households that are having to be the man and the woman. And that has actually shown itself to have negative effects on boys growing up into being men, and how they associate themselves with their own traits and how they present themselves in life. Not saying that a woman solo raising a boy is negative, saying that a boy growing up into being a man is showing to have more difficulty in their authenticity and masculinity, because they were raised by somebody where masculinity is not inherent. And so it becomes, the woman's doing the best that she can, and she's trying to give that role model to him, but she inherently doesn't have the presentation of a man. And so from traits to actions to thought process to all of those things. And so that's affecting boys this upcoming, and that could be why we're seeing a lot more of these boys that aren't sure how to even be man, and they're totally consumed and they're effeminized, and they have struggles trying to relate to masculinity, and then they have a lot of depression and sadness because of the fact that they can't associate with men because they don't know how to be that way. And I think that could be a lot of what's going on in today's younger society, where they're just completely effeminized. And they're also, in a lot of ways, they're being taught that by the school system as well. I think that colleges aren't doing us any favors, because they're taking away these young men, they're taking away their ability to own authenticity and have conversations. And because they see conflict as labeling it in some derogatory way. They see conflict as negative, and then they associate that with masculinity. But conflict is great. You and I can have a conversation of conflict and still be friends. Healthy
Yeah.
conflict is great, and I think that's a positive thing in society because it challenges norms, it challenges perceptions, it challenges ways of thinking. And that is incredibly healthy. But when you're labeling that as negative, you're promoting people to just have groupthink. And then you're promoting people to just be yes because they want to be accepted. Because at the end of the day, we're all social creatures. So we're having a huge problem, in my opinion, with these following generations coming up. And it takes men like us in this group, I guess I would say in our generation, to start leading from the front. And yeah, we get to come out and talk about our feelings and emotions, but we're also not scared to go get in a ring and battle it out with one another. We're not scared to go fucking lift heavy weights or go hunting or go shooting. We're not scared to learn how to protect. We're not scared to do that, but we're also not scared to be vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
think that's where we start to find a different balance. And I think that is where masculinity needs to go. I'm very passionate about the fact that in a lot of ways, the warriors of old were what we should be getting back to because most of them were incredibly balanced. Like people don't realize, or at least I don't believe people realize that the samurai, for instance, were very heavily tied to the practices of meditation and to their practices of farming and all these things when they were at home and not fighting, right? And so there was a lot of different things that they were tied to that led balance. The Spartans in a gogi learned how to dance and sing. They weren't just fighting all the time. There was a balance to them. They had the ability to do poems. I mean, Marcus Aurelius himself was a poet and a warrior. Like, I mean, it's just these things that were most men aren't being taught or somehow got eradicated from the perceptions of society. But really, if we can get back to that, we're showing a balanced side of masculinity that people haven't seen in a long time. And I think that's where men need to start going.
Yeah, and I love how, like, as we were doing the show here, it's like there was like is it a crescendo where you start going up a
Yeah.
little bit, and then now we're like on the other side of like now this is where things need to go, and it was just like a natural transition. But I think that that's 100% true, and I didn't know that about like Marcus Aurelius and stuff, but I do know like some of the old soldiers and stuff, and even I'm obsessed with the Vikings, like the Vikings and the pagans, like they got such a bad rap, but they were obsessed with family, farming, taking care of it. And then like when they're home, they're home. When they're put in the situation that they need to defend or conquer, they go and do that. And they had the ability to fluidly switch between fighter or, basically provider. And if men can start seeing that and seeing that, expressing it, don't be a baby about it. And this is just my maybe toxic masculinity. Don't be a baby about it and sit and wallow and be like, oh, nobody wants that, man or woman. Nobody wants that victim mentality. But to be in tune with those emotions will then intensify the relationship, which is a good thing. And then you should be able to speak about certain things. The conflict just by itself, I think a lot of people cringe at the word conflict. Like, ooh, somebody's going to die. No, that's not what that means. It means there's two disagreeing statements. You come, you speak about it, and that can be labeled as conflict. And then you
Hmm.
figure out, did you learn something from that? Do you agree with that person now? Or do you still remain friends and keep your sides on that? That's how debate club used to be back in high school. That's how we used to approach things. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
stepping into that balance is huge. And I know, I mean, I text you all the time about this stuff. Like when I'm going through just personal stuff, like there's very few people that I can talk to about this because most men are having trouble understanding their own emotions, let alone if I'm like, hey, I'm struggling in this category. They're like, I don't have any experience in this whatsoever. Like I don't know how to handle my own shit. I can't handle yours. So to see like two macho men, I'll say that, be able to go back and forth in feelings and emotions, but still crush it in the gym, go chop down a freaking tree if we want to, or go to the Kodiak experience and go and drop off the grid and go do some awesome stuff there. Like it's us tapping into that. And what I've noticed, even from just doing the guys trip with Kyle Deppie, is when men go into those elements, it feels so good. It feels so natural. And it's like, wow, like I need to do this more often because we're so busy in the
Hmm.
day in and day out. We're not in nature. We're not doing masculine things. We're not chopping out trees. We're barely providing. We're making money, but yeah, it's providing. But like, we're not like, hey, I got to go kill a chicken today so I can feed my family. It's like we're just doing the modern day provider. And I think going back to that primitive stuff is vastly, vastly important. What are your thoughts?
Hmm. There's so many different layers to that, but the pieces of getting back to what the basics were for men, which is like, for instance, being out in the wilderness, like there, that in general for human beings is incredibly powerful. They have, I think it's the Japanese, they do what's called forest bathing, and it's one of those things where you get out in nature and there's a connection through the energetics of the earth and the magnetism of the earth that actually ends up polarizing to our bodies and syncing us up with the aspects of nature. And inherently we've evolved from there. That's why circadian rhythms are so important. They still affect us to today. And you know, you can find a lot of problems hormonally, and you can find a lot of problems energetically with the fact that you are fucked on your circadian rhythm. But we've evolved from that, just like being in nature has been one of those things. But getting back to, I think, the basics, I wouldn't necessarily say primitive, right? But I would say basic. I would say the basics of life, the essentials of life. Stop trying to live in these, like, I would say, concrete jungle constructs of the expectations of what it's like, and start getting back to brotherhood, start getting back to nature, start getting back to shutting off social media and peace. I saw this really funny meme, and the store, it was a store, and they had a sign up that says, "We don't have Wi-Fi. Pretend like it's 1995 and talk to each other." And I was like, that's dope, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
just the fact of being social with one another in person is a
yeah,
powerful event, because you know, we know this through studies, and that is that we have an energetic magnetism field that comes out from our heart and it extends 6 feet, right? And so when we look at this and say, okay, when I'm in Jacque's energy field of 6 feet and he's in mine, there's a different bond that we create as human beings as opposed to being on here through the computer screen. And we can try to say as much as we want, like, oh, I feel your energy through the computer screen. No, go fuck yourself. It's not really that way. Like, it
yeah,
doesn't work that way. But I
yeah,
can feel your energy when I'm actually in your energy. And that cross pollination of that
yeah,
creates a tighter bond. It creates social fulfillment. And
yeah,
because we're social community creatures, we need that. And it brings balance back to us. And so all of these things, like you said, going to those men's events and being able to be in that environment of outdoors, but also around the energy of other men, changes the dynamic of the relationship, the conversation. Because then when you feel that energy, maybe you feel like opening up a little more. You don't know
mhm,
why. You just
yeah,
trust those guys a little more than you would hanging out on the computer screen. And all of a sudden you're talking about, yeah, man, I've been having trouble sexually with my wife, and like I just really haven't had the motivation. And then all of a sudden then you're there at the event, and they find out you're a hormonal doctor, and you're a functional medicine doctor, and you're like, hey bro, I can actually help you with that. And it's like,
yeah,
but had he never spoken his truth because he was scared to speak it in front of other men through emasculation or through the past judgments or societal constructs, he would have never had that conversation with you and then been able to correct his hormones. And so through all of these things, there is getting back to the basics of being human beings. The whole mask bullshit, the whole, oh, let's talk through Zoom, everything's now through Zoom, all this other shit. All that stuff, in my opinion, has been created purposely to create divisiveness. And while some of the things have been benefit, like we're doing this podcast right now, not in person, this is beneficial. You and I maintain a strong friendship because we have, technology, but we also make it an intention to get together, right? But these things have lent us some positive things, but there's an insurmountable negative effect that's happening socially, and we're becoming more divided as a culture. And then as men right now, that's one of the biggest problems I see with guys when I coach them, when they're coming to my events. It's like, yeah, I can't find a group of brothers. I don't know how to make friends. Or yeah, I've never spoken about my struggles in front of other men. And my God, it feels great to let that out and then get the feedback from you guys and feel that from you. Like those things are incredibly important for men. And what's causing the downturn in masculinity, in my turn, is my opinion, is the fact that we got away from those things. And now we need to get back to them. And then we need to get back to them in a positive way. It doesn't need to be like drinking alcohol, getting smashed, and then you get
Yeah.
emotional. It's like, no, we're having dinner together and we can actually talk about real stuff because there's zero judgment. Neither one of us is going to judge the other person for saying that, yeah, I'm really struggling as a father, or I'm really struggling as a husband, or I'm really struggling as just trying to be myself. None of us are going to judge that. And actually, more or less, most men feel the same way about themselves. We just don't know it because we don't talk that much anymore. We're not in person anymore
Yeah.
and connecting with one another. So, to all of those things, it is incredibly important to get back to the basics and to start building a strong foundation from the root of what made us a collective, connected society.
Yeah. I remember, shoot, this is probably close to 10 years ago or so, before like social media really took off of things. I don't even know when social media really did, but it was like 10 years ago. And I remember, no, I was on social media because I got in a battle on social media. So it was Facebook,
I
the OG. Well, I guess MySpace was the OG, but
was gonna say MySpace, right? That was the
MySpace was
OG.
there. So I was on Facebook, and I think I was in chiropractic school, and this guy posted something about how I don't know. It was like like online gaming, World of Warcraft or something like that, like online. And I made the comment, and I'm like, bro, like you need to, like, that's not social interaction, because he said it was. I'm like, it's not. Like that's some virtual stuff. That's a lot of people hiding behind a computer screen. You don't really know who they are. And his rebuttal back was, I'm talking to people in Japan and this and this and this. So I'm cultured and I'm able to talk to these people. I'm like, no, you're missing that one-on-one. And it's crucial in the 6 foot heart field. Like a lot of people don't know about that. And my listeners hopefully know about it, and yours do as well. But when you're close and you have that ability to be able to connect and have that camaraderie, and to me, the easiest way to do it is around a campfire. I don't know
Hmm.
why, but anytime there's a campfire, there's a circle. It's just like open conversation. You sit in silence for a minute, and then all of a sudden somebody is like, hey guys, I've been struggling with blah 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 blah. And it's just like therapy, just men talking to men, and you're releasing these burdens that you think, because we tend to put ourselves on these islands where it's like, ah, it's just me. I'm
Hmm.
the only one suffering through this stuff right now, so nobody
Yep.
understands my plight. And then you bring it up, and then you find 10 other people. You're like, bro, welcome to the freaking club. It's been 10 years I've been trying to figure this shit out. And it's like one after another after another. And you're like, whoa, there's a common theme here. And some of it could come down to the fact that we don't have any social interaction. Again, all of my consults that I do are virtual. Now, I get a lot out of that, but I found up until this week, I don't really leave the house. Like I there's no
Hmm.
need for me to, oh, no need. I work in this office here, then I go into my gym in the garage, then I come eat and I hang out with the family, and then I go to sleep. So I'm stuck in the confines of this house. And what I found myself doing, my energy was dipping, and then my motivation was dipping, and then my workouts were dipping. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I was like, you know what? I still have my gym membership. I was like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to see how it feels. And so you go to the gym, and you don't necessarily have to talk to people. You do like the head nods to the fellow bros working out, people with beards. You're like, yeah, you're an awesome dude, great beard. And you just get like, you kind of move, but it, like that energy of it. And for men, I think that men need to be surrounded by other men and exceptional men, because then it challenges us to also become exceptional men. Because once we know that it's possible, we see an example of, we're like, well, how is so-and-so doing that? It's possible. And then we have to internally reflect and be like, hey, I'm capable of that. I'm worthy of that. Why don't I just do that? Or why don't I raise my level because I want to be more like that, or I want to reach the next level? And so there's that inherent competition between men. And I've been feeling great. I told Megan, like, I've been feeling great since going out to the gym. We still have the gym in the house, obviously. I still get
Yeah.
workouts in there. but it's also 110 degrees in Arizona,
Yeah.
and I'm basically working out in a sauna. It's really freaking
Yeah.
hot in there. So I'm like, maybe during the summer months, I'll go work out in the gym. Then in the winter months when it's cold, I'll come and I'll resume all my workouts in the home gym. But I think that the camaraderie is huge, and that's what I kind of wanted to bring up today. And I know that you've got another call that's going to be coming up, so I do want to be mindful of your time here. But what you do, there's nobody else that really does that. Nobody I'm aware of that does that. So I wanted you to talk about the art of masculinity in terms of your wild man experiences and all the stuff that you have to offer to be able to really breathe life into this and bring that camaraderie back.
Yeah, I mean, you hit something that was important, which was the quality of men that you surround yourself with as well. There is like, you can't just get into the energy field of men and expect things to get better, right? So, like, I want to give people a disclaimer there. I can't just go surround myself with a bunch of men and be like, yeah, this is what Johnny's talking about. Or this is no, it doesn't work that way because
Yeah.
those guys could have incredibly negative perceptions and maybe not to their consciousness levels, but their subconscious level, they don't understand why. But when another man says something is going great in their life, they always want to play the negative Nancy or the quote unquote realist, right? And so surrounding yourself with men like that doesn't raise your vibration. And in fact, a lot of times that brings your vibration down and it becomes the crab mentality that, it was so big in the self-development world back in like 2018, the whole crab story. But that's the thing is they want to pull you down to be at their level because they have no ambition in life or they lost their will or they lost their passion, never found their purpose, whatever it is. So the caliber of man is important. And what I have come to find, especially recently in life, is that, when you surround yourself with men who have good hearts and good intentions and also have created extreme wealth and, happiness in their life, it's really hard for you to poke holes in that guy and try to justify why he got that place in life and why you're not there. And so what happens is when you surround yourself with those kinds of people, you end up being challenged to be like, well, if I'm deserving of his friendship because he's a fucking awesome dude, if I'm deserving of that, I need to raise myself because he's surrounding himself with me too. And so it challenges you to rise, man. And when you aren't around those kinds of guys, you aren't challenging yourself to rise. And in a lot of cases, if you're surrounding yourself with a majority of guys that are bringing you down, you will just continue to fall back to either where you were or even lower. And so it is about the caliber of man that you surround yourself with. That is incredibly important. And I was actually talking to Taylor the other day, and I was like, yeah, I'm just like really humbled at some of the men who are in my life today that I can text and I call friends. And I'm like, man, sometimes I don't know why. I even have those thoughts like why they want to be my friend or like what they see in me. But I told her, I was like, they deserve to have a friend that's up on their level. So I feel like the infant in some of these groups. And I'm like, man, I feel like a little kid and they're the big dogs. And she's like, that's good. That's where you should be.
Yeah.
Because if you feel that way, that means that you're being challenged to grow and you have a good heart. So you want to be where they are, not out of spite or out of competition, but out of the fact that you're honoring them in their friends that they surround themselves with. And so when we had that conversation, it hit me. I was like, holy crap, like that's incredibly important. And that is something that, I need to take into consideration when I see maybe that I don't feel like I'm worth the friends that I have in my life because I am worth it. And the fact that I get to challenge myself and I love challenging myself because living in the uncomfortable, getting comfortable in the uncomfortable is where growth happens,
Yeah.
right? Too many men out there are comfortable and comfortable. And that's where you stay stagnant. But if you can get comfortable in the uncomfortable, you're always going to challenge yourself and grow. So all of that to be said that your tribe is incredibly important. And what I do for men, it is incredibly unique. And there's not a single person in the men's development space that does the shit that I do or runs it the way that I do. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
And I would put my events up against anybody's out there and say, you're going to get something way different and way better from mine. Not to downplay them, I
Yeah.
respect a lot of them, and I know most of the men in the men's development space, but I know what I give and I know what they get from being around my energy and the life that I've lived in the way that I help men really see something different in themselves. And so for my wild man experience, it's for me, it's a combination of things. I combine treating men because I don't think, and I know this from my own self, is we don't as men really like to give ourselves a lot of nice things in the sense of treating ourselves to maybe a vacation, right?
Yeah.
But I give men a VIP style vacation that's a very masculine container. So it's not like VIP at the spa or VIP at an all-inclusive resort.
Yeah.
No, it's VIP at some manly shit. So one
Yeah.
of them is my upcoming Kodiak, Alaska one, where we're going out and we're hitting bucket list stuff. We're doing
Yeah.
deep sea fishing. We're taking Polaris's off-roading and doing cove fishing. We're doing some river fishing. We're getting on a boat plane and going and seeing Kodiak bears. We're doing hiking. So we're doing a lot of things that are just in the wilderness, out in nature, in an untamed, untapped location that's just a bucket list, brother. And it's just so much fun and beauty out there that guys aren't going to be able to help themselves but be like, wow, I just feel at peace and at home with this. And then they're surrounded by their brothers. They get to have great conversations over the meals. Everything's included. So you just have, all the guys have to do is show up and get out of there on the last day. That's it. They're taken care of the entire time that they're there. But it's an incredibly outdoors masculine container to allow men to bond together. And the conversations that we have are just completely, in my opinion, they're completely bonding and substantial, because we're not talking about titties and football. And anybody that does is going to get challenged out there. That's
Yeah.
not the conversations we're having. We're having real conversations about our lives, where we are, how we got there, where we want to go, what's holding us back. Like, we have that real conversation, and that's what's really beautiful about it. And the other event that I have, which is out of Corpus Christi, is another all-inclusive VIP style event, but it's wrapped up in what I used to do in special operations and what I used to do in protection. And that's getting guys behind a gun, letting them shoot out of a helicopter, letting them shoot out of a moving vehicle, teaching them how to move and shoot. They get behind a sniper rifle, like all of these different fun things. But we're also doing some hatchet throwing, having cigars, or sitting around a bonfire, having real conversations at our dinners. And we have an executive chef on site. The meals are absolutely amazing. And the guys get to really connect and be present with each other. So for me, that's where growth happens, because there's two places that men really bond. And it's through extreme adversity or through extreme adrenaline. And I wanted to give guys the adrenaline version. So that's what we do at the Wild Man Experience. I'm very proud of the container that I've curated over the years for these men. And to me, it's incredibly inspiring to watch the development in these men in just a short amount of time. The way that they come back home and they have the impact, maybe it's like they have more drive in their life because they finally surrounded themselves with men who are up leveling, or it's because the fact that they got clarity on a situation and they can go back home and be a better father or husband, or it's just the fact that they realize they can treat themselves with respect and have a better internal dialogue. All of these things come back with the men after these events, and it's just incredibly humbling to hear those stories and watch them come back home and see how it really impacts their lives.
One of the things that's unique about you as well is, for people who don't understand it, just trust it. But the energy of Johnny attracts awesome people. Like, I don't know of you surrounding yourself by anybody who is a piece of shit, and you don't have time, you don't have the energy for that. But then on the flip side of that, you know what you want to kind of gravitate towards you. And so I've been trying to come to a freaking Wild Man since I met you. And he's like, oh, this one's on your daughter's birthday. This one's on I think my son's birthday was the other. I'm like, God dang it. Let me get to one. So I'll finally be able to come to the Kodiak experience, which is going to be awesome. But the other thing that I'm excited about is I know that the caliber of people that are also going to be coming to the event are going to be great people. There's not going to be the negative Nancy's, the victims, the people who are just going to try, the crabs that are just trying to pull you down.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm excited for, obviously, to see you again. but then to be surrounded by more people like us that can help to inspire. And then what my goal is by going there as well is, we walk around with a cup of what we're able to give with or what we're able to serve with. And I want to leave with a bigger cup. Maybe I'm walking around with an 8-ounce cup right now. I want a 16-ounce or a 32-ounce cup of like, I feel so freaking filled up right now that I can give and I can serve. I could be a better father. I could be a better husband. I could be a better, mentor or coach to other docs, or be better for my patients. And so we have this spillover effect of when we go and we do these things. And I knew as soon as you were like, yeah, we're going Kodiak, and he told me the dates. I'm like, yep, I'm in. Like, I freaking got it. Like, yes, finally a week that I can, take off and be good. And then I saw the stuff that you added on there. I'm like, I went to Megan immediately. I'm like, check this out. I'm like, we're going to be doing this, 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 this. And she goes, awesome. Just put it on the calendar and go. I'm like, fantastic. So
yeah,
I really want anybody who's listening to this, definitely check out Johnny. We'll put all of his everything basically in the show notes where you can find him, etc. But I strongly encourage two things. One, go to the experience, and two, hurry the hell up, because the slots do fill up very quickly for these events. Yeah. So if you're thinking about it, or you need to run the approval past the misses, whatever, do it quickly. Otherwise, this is going to go. Because the other thing is, I'm going to make sure that I continue to tell my patients about this as well. Because I have a lot of patients that love being outdoors, but they've never been surrounded by like camaraderie. They're like, I'll go out by myself. I'll go hunting by myself. And so it'd be cool to have them also come and experience these things and be like, wow, there's more to life than what I already knew, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And if you stay in your own space and you never expand outside of that, like you're never really going to grow. And, it's one thing to be comfortable. And I'm a huge advocate for that, is to get comfortable with yourself. Because at the end of the day, if everything else left you, you can't run away from you. But on the same token, when you've come to that place where you are comfortable with yourself, you need to expand your horizons. And that's by growing your tribe. Because again, back to what we already said, that's what really challenges you.
Yeah. And I know we could keep going off on this, but it's just, again, I remember being on the boat deep sea fishing with you and Elliot. And like, I remember when we first started talking, like on the boat. And I don't know if it was you or Elliot, we were like, what do you want? What do you want out of life? What do you want to see? And I'm like, oh, I'd like to do this. I think it was like, I'd like to launch a coaching program or something like that. And then like we kept going, and then it escalated. And like, I want a freaking island. I want a whole island of healthy people that do healthy things. We don't have to worry about, tyrannical ruling. Like, people are there. There's camaraderie. There's everything. So like, just the up leveling in maybe 15 minutes of a conversation went from playing small, playing safe, things that are totally attainable, which I'm doing right now. We're launching a coaching program in a couple weeks here, but we've got that. But like, the bigger picture is a freaking island. And it's not for the egoic side of things. Like, I want to own an island. It's because I want a place for people to feel healthy, happy, camaraderie, and experience. And it's just, So conversations like what you're going to get at the Wild Man is going to be unlike anything else, because I know at least Johnny's going to be there. So I know that I'm going to be up leveled just because of Johnny. So if we bring more people like that, it's going to be a great time and a great experience. So again, I'll make sure that we put that down in the show notes for us as well, to make sure that we promote this for you. But any closing thoughts, anything to end with before we finish up here today?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest features I think that men are struggling with today is true authenticity with themselves. And there is this compulsion to want to comply with society, which is what allows things like, because I want to bring this podcast full circle, is that for people to term toxic masculinity out there, and then for men to buy into this and start deteriorating the quality of masculinity that's in this world, that is what the real problem is. And part of that is the fact that men don't feel safe now being authentic to themselves. And so what I want to leave men with is like, fuck what everybody else says. I never got anywhere in life listening to other people. And to this day, I create my experiences, I create my programs, I do what I want to do based upon the fact that what's in alignment with me, not what all the rest of the coaching world's doing, or what all the rest of, the self-development or society's doing. Hell, I just partnered with the MPB movement, the Empowered Brotherhood out of Austin, Texas, some dear friends of mine who run that. And we just created something called Activate Your Alpha. And in that, we just broke the mold of what it's like to do men's development, like straight up broke the mold. And the reason why we did that is because we're not concerned about the status quo. We're not concerned about what's expected of us. We're only concerned about what's in alignment with us. And for every man out there, it's find out what that alignment is with you, because at the end of the day, you can listen to me or you can listen to any other guy out there that's running a men's podcast or whatever, right? And there's going to be certain levels of subjectivity on what men should be like, right? We all have that. It's subjective. It's not objective. There is no objective norms for masculinity. So the point is that find what lights you up as being a man and how you show up in this world. Find that and then start living that truth. Because if you do that, you're going to start influencing a different way of masculinity, a positive way of masculinity, because you're going to show up with more confidence. You're going to show up with more ambition. You're going to show up with more of who you truly are, so people can actually see you. And then they're going to be like, wow, that's what authenticity looks like. That's what confident looks like. That's what a man should be. And so for all you guys out there, start living authentically, man. Like, find out what that is, write it down, start to divulge that to yourself, start to reframe what masculinity is in your eyes, and then live that fucking truth. Because the longer you don't live that truth, the longer you're just going to stay unhappy and in misery. And so I just challenge men, you want to be the difference maker, you want to be the front runner, you want to be somebody who breaks the mold. Well, then start being you and stop trying to be what society tells you you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I love it, man. I have nothing else to add to that. That was a beautiful way to close. So again, man, thank you so much for being on this. We talked about potentially doing a little series together as well, and I have a feeling that's going to come to fruition as well. So for the listeners, be prepared for more conversations like this. And if you have something that you want Johnny and I to talk about, feel free to reach out to either one of us on social media, and we could definitely string that together for you guys. Because, I mean, he is my brother here. Not really, but pretty much my brother. So we can talk and riff about anything. So thanks again, man, for joining the show. And I guess until next time.